Today we're going to be carving a crescent moon, or man in the moon. The rough out I've put into my sketchbook here on a 2" by 2" block that's going to be 1/2 inch thick. So you can see we're trying to maximize the amount of space that we're using, which helps to cut down on the amount of rough out we're going to have to do. Looking at our block here, the portion in red is what we're going to be roughing out. My approach to this is going to be the approach that I had when I first started carving, which was everything by hand. I didn't have any saws. I didn't have a coping saw to remove that, or a scroll saw or a band saw. So to show that we can do this with just a simple hand tool, that's what we're going to do today. And by tool, I mean a pocket knife. More specifically, this number 44 pattern medium Stockman, which was provided by Case. It has a blue synthetic handle, and I've already pre-sharpened it in preparation for this video. Pointing out the sheep's foot, it's going to serve us well initially here as we start roughing out and hogging out material. And this is all because of the point. Using the point of the sheep's foot, I'm making score lines around the face and the profile so that as we work up to it, it cuts down on the likelihood of any tear outs. Now, this isn't something you necessarily have to do. I choose to do it out of habit and experience. Notice the way that I'm taking the cuts. By the way that I'm using the marker, I'm going to go from the left to the right, working my way towards the middle. I'm not trying to take everything out at one time. I'm treating this like a puzzle, and we're trying to find the best way to get to the middle. Now, I have sped up the rough out portion mainly and cut some of it out even to simply save time. There's no set in stone way of doing what we're doing right now. We're working towards the middle. As you're doing this, you might think that parts of it are looking sloppy and chopped up. That's only temporary. You'll see why as we keep going on here. Now, if you see the way that I'm holding the knife, I'm choked up on that blade. That gives me more control over the cuts, especially with the point on the sheep's foot. If you see, I'm just curling my hand, which allows me to take deeper cuts and slowly remove more material. I'm just taking away all this ugly material now, trying to get it down to where it's the majority of the profile and the majority of the red's gone. And I'll work from top to bottom. I'm also flipping from one side to the other so that the progress to the center remains even for the most part. I don't want to go too deep on one side and potentially mess up the profile itself. At this point, I've switched over to the longer clip blade The purpose of this is to put cleaner slicing cuts as I'm getting closer to the ink line on the profile of the face. And we don't have to worry about going right up to that line, but we do want this to start looking a little cleaner. And I'm just pushing in and up at the same time, letting that narrow point of the clip blade just create that nice clean cut for me. Be mindful of the grain direction here. If the knife's not wanting to go, try cutting the other direction. Because we are starting to get closer to that profile. Now, the reason why we don't have to get up to the lips or to the ink mark is because as we start rounding towards the center, the profile is naturally going to come into play on its own. It's naturally going to form. So we only have to get it relatively close, not right next to it. But we're going to first rough out the rest of the red, and then we're going to start carving the face itself. I carve a little from each side, creating a centerline point. And then you could just go in, follow up, cut that portion out. And that's how we work towards the center on the outside. Rinse and repeat. We're going to do the same for the other corners. Now, for the amount of material we've removed, this is a weaker portion, and that's going to be true on the top as well. Anything beyond the center portion past the nose, you should view as a weaker area that you need to be mindful of as far as your grip and where you're placing pressure. Flat portions here are where we haven't quite gotten to the center with the rounding, and you just use that as a guide. It tells you, hey, I've got a little bit more to cut from here. I need to take a little more off the top or the right or the left side. It's a gauge. It's just telling you where you are in the process, and the rough out portion is completed. Pulling out an earlier carving to use as an example and a reference, we can see what we need to do now to move towards the center with our rounding in order to bring that face to life and to give it some character. Notice the back side of the earlier carving is not perfectly symmetrical. For me, I like it. It gives it character. But that's what we're going to be doing with the rough out. And we'll start by adding a score line right along the lips. And we'll also do the same at the base of the nose. And we're just rounding up and in. Throwing down another stop cut up underneath the nose to help break away that material. And everywhere we have a pen mark, I try to make a score line straight down. Just working towards that with nice little shavings. Now as we're rounding in, just trying to keep these cuts clean. And we're just following up to where the ink line is. This is also where I'll start switching back and forth some to help bring both sides in at roughly the same amount. So we're trying to shape the nose now. And if you just imagine a line that runs right down the center of that, we're just going to round right up to it. At the top of the nose, I place a stop cut right at the brow to help differentiate between the nose and the brow. And this is where you start to see that character coming into it. There's not a 1, 2, 3 perfect way to do this rounding. You find a section that you feel comfortable attacking and going at, and you just start removing material. For example, here, I decided I didn't want a big wide chin. I wanted to narrow it down more. So I was just taking advantage of that end grain and making clean slicing cuts around. This is really where we just get to start having a lot of fun with this. Following the grain of the wood up to our stop cuts, cleaning them up, rounding them over, and you do it to where it's pleasing to you. If it's pleasing to your eye, it'll probably be pleasing to others' eyes. Now, I didn't draw the other side. I'll go in and add a few lines here and there, but for the most part, I'm just relying on my experience and where I know those cuts should be going. Around the eye, first I'm doing a straight down score cut, and then I'm going to cut in from the top and the bottom, just rounding down into that score. With that, we're creating the cheekbone, crow's foot, and the base of the eye. Shaping up the bridge of the nose some more. And flipping back and forth. If there is a more effective way of doing this, I was never smart enough to learn it. This is the way I taught myself, and hopefully you're getting a little joy from it too. Stop off and check your work. Gauge whether or not you need to move to a different part and take more material away. Here, working on that upper lip and then moving back to under the eye. Creating levels. Adding depth around the eye. Now I haven't gone above it yet. We're still just shaping that cheekbone and establishing lines that would give the appearance of the cheekbone and a crow's foot, and then the line that would run from the corner of the nose down and around the mouth, all the while rounding towards the center. Now we're establishing the upper portion of the eye and the brow. So running that score cut and then rounding into it, we establish both of those. Pay attention to how my hands are working together for this. I line the cut up, but I'm letting my thumb from the opposite hand guide it through. That way, I have more control in the cut. I get a cleaner cut, a safer cut, and we can move on without band-aids. Speaking of, though, that band-aid you see there is not from carving. No, it is from a temperamental tiller. It was time to get the garden ready. So as we progress, certain areas aren't as well established, so I'll go back, place another score line, cut a little deeper in, giving me a chance to round the cheeks more, round the base of the eye more. Basically, we're just bringing this face to life. Paying attention to the direction of the grain. And if your knife's not sharp enough, it's going to let you know here. Especially with a softer wood like basswood. The wood tends to bruise or bend rather than cut. So if you're getting that, you might want to take a moment to stop and get your blade back to where it needs to be. But if that's not an issue for you, you just keep trucking right along. Again, stopping, checking our progress. I noticed that the brow was more established in the earlier carving, and that was a feature on it that I really liked, so I'm trying to reproduce that here. And I do realize he has a grumpy face. That's just the way I liked him. But it's a design feature that you can modify if you want to do this. You want to change that to more of a smile? Go for it. It's your carving, not mine. Always feels good to get those clean, burnishing cuts. When the blade's going perfectly with the grain. I just wasn't satisfied with that nose. Just keep digging it in a little bit deeper and a little bit deeper. Rounding out more now under the nose. What I'm doing here is I'm going in and separating the lips, rounding in on the other side. We don't need an exact duplicate, we just need to get some established bases here to go in and start throwing down some more score lines and creating the other side of the face. just letting my hands work together. Line up the cut, let the other thumb push it in or push it through. Not trying to do anything wild or crazy with the knife, because that's when accidents happen and stitches are needed. I would say for all the scars that I have, every one of them resulted from me doing something I should not have been doing with my tools. So user error. Hopefully you can see how just by adding that slight rounding at the base on the back side of the crescent moon, it's giving it a lot more character. It's making it look like it should, which is it's rounded, right? State the obvious. We're trying to make it obvious. What we don't want is to show somebody the carving, ask them what they think. The first thing we have to do is tell them what it is. So as a general rule, I always show carvings to my children first. The way I see it, if a 3 or a 4-year-old can tell you what they're looking at, you're on the right track. And of course, if you want praise, you show it to your mother or your grandmother. But if you're wanting some honest, constructive criticism, in my experience, then I just take it to my dad or my grandfather. At this point in the carving, we're cleaning up those little areas, places where you might still see a bit of ink, places where it might seem square, just rounding it off, make it look pretty. And as far as finishing goes, you can never go wrong with just hitting it with a little oil, some linseed oil. Of course, you can add ink. You can tell by the photos that I'm going to show here. This one example, I used yellow ink, thinned down, and applied it until I was happy with the final product. And the other example is finished with linseed oil. Now, as you can see, by rounding everything to the center, we were able to establish the chin, the face itself. See the break in the lips. All in all, I think he turned out well. As always, thanks for watching. If I've earned it, subscribe, hit that like button. Other than that, take good care.